Welcome to episode 6. We're halfway through this retrospective. This episode is titled The Catch-Up. What am I catching up on? We're going to talk about some movies that as a self-proclaimed movie fan I probably should have seen by now. So this is me catching up on movies that are considered classics. When we say classics, what are we talking about? We're talking about movies that are on the AFI Top 100 list. We're talking about, Oscar winners. We're talking about IMDb Top 100. One of the things that I want to do with this episode is I want to dig into what it means to be a classic. Right? How does a movie go into classic status? I'm going to have a great conversation with my friend Chris Love, and we're going to go through a list of about 20 movies and see if are they going to survive into what I'm going to call the Movie a Day New Classics list. Do you remember, I think it was Entertainment Weekly did it, and maybe TNT sort of did it, but the whole idea of like the new classics.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like we need to create a list of new classics.
Yes.
Right? So, let's do a like rapid fire kind of exercise with the movies on my list.
Okay, cool.
And let's see if we're going to keep them on our potential new list of classics.
Okay. Got it.
So these are in alphabetical order.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. So I have pulled out, 20, 24 movies out of the 375 that I watched.
Right.
That people consider classics for a number of different reasons. We're going to go through the list and say maybe a few things about them and whether it's going to survive and potentially be on our list of new classics.
Okay.
That we will publish at some future date.
Okay.
All right. So the first one. 10 Things I Hate About You. Heath Ledger had an amazing breakout performance from this movie. What do you think?
Absolutely. Let me tell you what. My favorite scenes involve Gabrielle Union because her ages. She looks the same as she did in the movie. But that scene where Julia Stiles was dancing on the table to Biggie, Biggie, Biggie.
Yep.
You see, I love that. That's what prompted her to do Save the Last Dance, I'm sure. So, Yes, absolutely. Love that movie.
I would agree. I think, I like movies that have iconic scenes. And this has the iconic scene of Heath Ledger singing in the bleachers or whatever.
Yes.
And it's one of those kind of like, kid empowerment moments or teen empowerment moments that I always like in movies because then like, oh man, that would be so cool if I was able to do something like that.
Right. Right.
So, there's a lot about this movie that I like. Definitely Julia Stiles' character was amazing in the fact that she did not need to be saved, right? She was her own person with her own desires and wants. She wasn't defined by Heath Ledger's character.
Right. Fun fact: this movie is a version, an updated version of Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew.
I did not know that.
I love me some 10 Things I Hate About You.
There you go. All right, so that makes our list.
Yay! Right.
2001: Space Odyssey. I think we can probably guess on this one.
Thumbs down. I think that, like I said, I think Kubrick was probably overrated, but he did. Honestly, I liked Apocalypse Now and The Shining much better.
I think if we were making a list of technical achievements, this movie's definitely on the list, right?
Absolutely.
You think about what he accomplished in 1968 with 1968 technology, the movie is amazing. Other than that, it's not making my list of classics. Sorry.
It's a slog. It's boring. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, Stanley.
All right. Next movie I have is American Me. This is directed by Edward James Olmos. He is a national treasure. This guy,
Right.
and this was his directorial debut.
Really?
Yeah.
So I did not know that, but yes. I loved this movie. I loved this one, and was he also the one that did directed Stand and Deliver? I know he was in it.
I don't know if he directed it. We can.
But I loved this movie. Yes, I think all classic lists could benefit from some more diversity for sure. And I think this movie was well made. It told a compelling story. And you're right, Edward James almost is a national treasure. So absolutely thumbs up.
Yeah, this is a movie for me that I had always heard about it, but I really didn't know what it was about, and it was so refreshing. And the diversity definitely helps.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those where people need to watch this and understand.
Mm-hmm.
There are other stories out there.
Right.
So for me,
centered around white people. Like there's not even it's not, we usually get those movies and then there's like the white character that comes in to be the savior, and that's the case here. So
yeah. And it's a generational story too, right? I mean, it's a huge story, and it's done so well. Definitely, I that's on my list.
Oh, Patrick Bateman.
American Psycho.
Yes, I love this movie. I let me tell you, and there's a sequel that nobody should ever see. Don't ever watch it. But I think that Christian Bale, because I remember Christian Bale from what was it, Empire of the Sun, and right, and so to see him do this Patrick Bateman character was first of all, it was hilarious. Second of all, it's a horror comedy.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I feel like needs to be on every list. But everybody knows somebody that's a Patrick Bateman, and you have that person in your office that you think you talk to the wrong way one time and they're gonna snap or whatever. I think it's just that it's an iconic character, but the movie in and of itself is just so entertaining, and it's one of those ones that I watch every time that it's on. If I run into it, I watch it.
So this movie for me, more than some of these other ones, was screaming its time period. Right? I mean, it is so 80s, and it's so Reagan economics 80s.
What do you think? Very nice.
There's a lot going on here. You could, if you don't look close enough, you can just kind of say, "Oh, this is dark comedy, whatever." But there's a whole story of kind of white privilege, white entitlement. There's a whole class, economic class thing that's going on in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many layers to this movie that I think definitely put it on the list.
Right. And I think it was based on a Bret Ellis Eastman novel or short story. That guy is really problematic. This movie was great, so I don't even care.
He's got issues. Next is going to be Francis Ford Coppola's epic Apocalypse Now.
Let me tell you, I am not into Francis Ford Coppola's mob movies. But Apocalypse Now, and I don't even like war movies. That's my thing. There are two war movies that I like. This one and Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Those two have always stuck with me. And I want to say that Lawrence Fishburne was in this movie, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? He was so young.
Yeah.
it was just a really well done movie. I would keep it. And I don't, like I said, I'm not a war movie person at all, but I would keep this one.
So
Absolutely.
so this movie, I mean, it blew me away. It
Mhm,
really did.
mhm,
So let's see, Apocalypse Now, 1979. I was watching this movie, and first of all, like I mean, I watched like I think the Redux or whatever. It was
mhm,
cleaned up beautifully. It still looks beautiful.
mhm.
But I'm like, how in the world did he get these shots?
Right?
There's no CG. I mean, I'm like, it's almost as if he was there in Vietnam
Mhm,
filming footage, knowing that he was going to make a movie years later.
mhm.
Um, Now, this the production of this movie was not too far removed from the war itself.
Right.
Um, but after watching this movie, I almost immediately went and watched Hearts of Darkness, which is the
Right.
making of,
Mhm.
um, which is a that story alone is amazing.
Right.
Um, but visually, the movie is a masterpiece. I mean,
Mhm.
it really is.
It must
Sorry,
have cost $8 million to make, like $800 million to make. And thinking about exactly what you were saying with the shots that they got, and the explosions, and all of these things, it's like it reminds me of like there are these scenes in movies where they're filming movies and they do this kind of pull back thing so that you
yeah,
can see like the camera crew and all that kind of stuff. And I think about like this movie when it
yeah, yeah.
and I just want to see like when you peel back and look at what all is going on and how much it must have cost, especially for the time. But it was money well spent.
Yeah, and the production took forever. Francis had to go into his own pocket. I mean, the
Mhm.
story of making this movie is as compelling as the movie itself. I highly recommend watching the movie and then watching Hearts of Darkness.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is a classic. The next two we're gonna kind of do as a package.
Okay.
All right. So we have
For
Before Sunrise and then Before Sunset.
right.
There's a third. I don't have it here, but it came out years later. I think each movie came out like 10 years apart.
Yeah, that
Um,
that last one literally came out in 20, maybe it was 2010, sometime in the 2010s.
yeah,
It was not as good.
yeah. Well, I don't think it works as well as a standalone movie as the other ones do.
Right, right. I agree. Before Sunrise, ah, you know, I've never been a chick flick kind of person. But there's just something compelling about these two and their back and forth. Like, they've got this whole push and pull that I think that any person who's been in kind of like a combative, like really, I won't say combative, but more like just all consuming kind of relationship. I think that there's stuff for anyone that they can relate to. And Before Sunrise and Before Sunset is more of that, but I would put one on the list and I would not put Before Sunset on.
Hmm. Okay.
I would put the Before Sunrise, Before Sunset. It could end up on in a secondary list.
So let's see. Before Sunrise was 1995.
Hmm.
Before Sunset was 2004.
Hmm.
And then where's the other one? Before Midnight was 2013.
Okay, yeah, I knew it was in the 2010s.
Um, so I think for me, the magic of these movies is watching them now all together as a package, knowing how much time had
You
passed
are
in between,
right. Hmm.
right? Um, it's the same thing that Richard Linklater did amazingly with Boyhood.
Right, right,
That he took, 13, 14 years to make this one movie so that the actors can age in real time. Um, but the way he kind of jumped in and out of these people's lives
hmm
across these three movies, um, I would almost cheat and not put any individual movie on this list, but put them together as a package. Um, because before Sunset, you have the whole young love
right.
and, you know, carefree, and a lot of these will resonate depending on where you are in
Right,
your life,
life, right,
right?
right.
Then, before sunrise, it deals a lot with missed opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
right? Think about how many people have these regrets. Like, had I done this, had I done that, how would my life be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then before midnight, that definitely gets into later in life and,
Right.
long-term relationships and how do you make that survive. And so it goes through the whole, up and down. But I don't know if I had watched these when they came out, if they would even be on the
Right,
list.
right.
But if you watch them for the first time now, kind of as a package and consider them as a package, I could make the case for them being on our new classics list.
I'm gonna
But I also wouldn't be too upset if they weren't.
Right. I'm gonna have to do that now because I did watch them when they came out and there was that gap. So I think
Yeah,
that's interesting. I think I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna watch them
it
together.
it's a completely different experience.
Mhm.
I really think that you will probably see them in a different light.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. I've got a challenge now.
All right, so the next one, and this is one that people talk about all the time. It is The Big Lebowski.
Listen, I like the dude. The dude abides. I get it. I think this is a quotable for folks for sure.
Yep, yep.
Right? This is one of those quotables. And I liked it the first time I watched it. It's not something that I like, it's not one of those where I watch it every time it comes on. But there's a lot, it's a cult classic, right? It is
Yeah.
a cult movie for folks like this and Fight Club. Like, I feel like those are like, when I went to law school, those were the movies that everyone was talking about all the time, right? Like, oh, The
Yeah.
Big Lebowski and Fight Club. I think that these are very white guy movies, though. And so I watched and I liked them, but I didn't quite understand why they were, people held them so closely and revered them in these ways. So if it were my list, I would not include them. But
Yeah.
I recognize the cultural significance of them enough to recognize that they are new classics, especially for a certain subset of folks. And it's a pretty large subset. So, I mean,
So for me, I agree. I would not put the movie itself on a list of classics.
mhm.
I would extract from this movie and have the dude be like icons of cinema,
Right.
right? And the Coen brothers definitely put something together that resonated with people, like you said. I mean, as a movie, I don't think you should consider this anywhere near like the Coen brothers' like strongest work,
Oh, no,
right?
definitely
I
not.
mean, they've done so much more. I mean, Fargo is just, I
That's
mean,
an amazing movie.
yeah. So, but what they did was they created iconic lines and this character and stuff. But
Mhm.
I mean, I felt that I had to watch this out of necessity. And as I was watching it, it never grabbed me to the point where like, all right, I get it, I understand. But I was like, okay, that happened. I watched it. Jeff Bridges' performance as the dude, very memorable.
Right,
I'm glad it exists, but yeah, for me, the movie does not go on the list.
right, right.
Broadcast news.
This
Have you seen?
this is very interesting. So, it's funny because I just watched The Howling a few weeks ago, and that's about a newscaster, and I think that those movies kind of like overlap in time, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Broadcast news is a very important movie, and it was very important for me as someone who went to school for journalism, right? And to see kind of how those things work, and the corrupt nature of news and all that. I think it was making this statement. Um, it's a statement that probably is timely, especially now with the way that we consume our news and the big networks and 24-hour news cycle. And I can see it, and those are really great performances. But I think that there are probably other movies that deal with the impact of media on society in a different way, and that might be more current. So if we were going to put together a new classics, I would look for one of those instead. Yeah. Because broadcast news still feels very stuck in the 80s.
Yeah, it's most definitely a time capsule movie, right? It's an artifact of the 80s, up and down the board, like how the movie's made, how the story's told, the look of it, everything. It's very James Brooks, it has his DNA all over it. He's the writer, director. It's very much, all him. It was an entertaining movie. I did enjoy it, but it is this time capsule of the 80s. I would not put it on the list. I think you're right. I think there's other movies that deal with the impacts of media in a number of ways better than this movie. So while I enjoyed it, I would recommend it. I would not put it on the new classics list either.
Agreed. I have a very soft spot in my heart for this movie and Old Calogero. And I love that, he was, lusting after a little dark-skinned black girl. I loved that, right? Especially seeing this as I was a teenager when I saw Bronx Tale, I think. I thought it was a really well-told story. And I think that it was nice to see, it was still like what was it, a 50s, 60s / still like a tale about
60s,
the neighborhood and the mob and all that kind of stuff and an effect on a younger person. I love this movie. I would put Goodfellas on the list instead.
So, as a gangster movie, it definitely is not too high on the list for that.
Right.
I will say, when I watched this, I knew nothing about it. I think the reason I even watched it is because we were talking about going to see the play. And so I watched the movie. A lot of people were talking about, oh, this movie's great. And I did not see the whole romance coming, right? And the racial kind of conflict there. But as I'm watching this, this is Robert De Niro. I think this is his directorial debut. This is his baby. And that the main character, that was Robert De Niro, right? Because his wife is black. And yeah. And I was like, this is he's like telling his story in a way here. But it was really compelling. That aspect of it to me was really compelling and something that I was surprised to see this movie tackling. Like I just didn't expect that. And so I could sort of see it because it does have that impact, but unfortunately it is a piece of the film, not a huge part of the film. Right. So it's something that they kind of touched on, but they didn't go all in on it. They didn't make a statement. They didn't, they acknowledged that this exists and that there's, but they didn't go too deep on it. So I think for me, I would agree. I don't think this one lands on the list. Casablanca.
I think it just has to.
No.
I feel like I'm a bad movie aficionado if I say that Casablanca doesn't go on the list. And I've seen it, and I think it does some things. I didn't dislike the movie. I'm just one of those people that doesn't get the hype around it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I think it's a fine movie. It's like Gone with the Wind to me. It's like, okay, it's a fine movie. I don't get the hype about it. Like, there with so many other choices out there.
Yeah, I think this, again, like 2001, goes on that technical list. Because I think if you look at what Casablanca brings to the table, I think it elevated movie making at that time. I think technically it's very sound. It told like this bigger, larger, sweeping story. It was a good movie. I enjoyed it, but I don't think it would be on my new classics. Right? Again, for new classics, I'm thinking about things that have impact, things that are very enjoyable, that have connection and stuff. If the world was ending and we had to put all these films in a bunker and we ended up losing Casablanca, I could be all right with that. Unfortunately, sorry.
Sorry, Bogey.
Yep.
This hurts my horror movie heart to say this, but no, I wouldn't put it on the list. I think like I said, it's a fine, it feels like a horror comedy because, mean, they're just so ridiculous, right? But, I mean, there are other movies now that kind of tackle some of the things that Deliverance tackles in a much better way, in a much funnier way, in a much, more technically sound way. I'm thinking we've got all of these movies where, The Hills Have Eyes, or, Texas Chainsaw Massacre even deals with crazy family inbreeding, weird stuff, right? I would not put this on a new classics. I would put something that tackles ridiculous Southern horror comedy better, like Ash versus Ash and Dale. What was it? Ash
Yeah.
Dale or whatever it was. That movie is hilarious.
Yeah.
And it does the things that, a horror movie is supposed to do or a horror comedy is supposed to do. So I say no to Deliverance. And I just don't, I don't want to put anything that leans into racism too much on my new classic.
Yeah. Well, and I think Deliverance is only in the conversation because of what it did at that time, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Deliverance was 1972.
Oh, dang. I didn't even realize it was that long.
So, the fact that, so the incident, obviously,
right.
I think was very disturbing to a lot of people because, it was a much, much more homophobic world, right?
Right.
So, I'm not trying to give too much away. Anyway.
Right.
I think
biggie.
Yeah, I think the what happened at that moment, the time frame, all that stuff, led into this movie being kind of in the conversation. And I will give it some props for some of the stuff it did towards the end with all of its characters and kind of who came out of this situation.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's really not that strong of a movie.
Right.
And I don't think it needs to be on our new classics list.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be on our old classic lists.
Exactly. I don't even know if I'd put it on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it doesn't really bring anything to the table at the end of the day.
No, and it doesn't even technically bring anything quite new. They just had that, they had some shock factor, which is so not shocking right now that it's like.
Election.
I haven't seen this movie in forever. Oh. I loved this movie. I love Reese Witherspoon in this movie. Who was her name? Tracy Flick.
Yep.
I loved Matthew Broderick in this movie. It's funny because it came out around the time that there were a few of these kind of high school satire sort of movies like this one, and there was, what was it? Drop Dead Gorgeous, the one about the girls in high school at the beauty pageant with Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah, and I think Rushmore came out around this time too, which kind of had that vibe, right?
Right. I prefer this one though. I prefer Election. Um, because I can see that happening now. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like this movie was in the 90s, and I feel like it's very, it's still very timely. I can see something like this happening now.
Yeah.
But I thought it was well acted. It was also, fun fact, I think Reese Witherspoon was actually pregnant when they were making this movie. So they had to do a lot of the hiding her bump and putting her in like big clothes and all that kind of stuff. So, I thought that was a feat in and of itself.
I had no idea. And the thing is, she looks so young. I mean, she plays high school well.
Right.
Yeah, this movie was amazing. If you have not seen Election, you've got to see this movie. The commentary and satire that's in this movie is crazy. There's a movie that came out this year. Maybe it's this year. It's with Hugh Jackman. It was on HBO. I think it's called Bad Education, is it? Anyway, where he plays he ends up playing this like corrupt administrator or whatever. Definitely some vibes of Election kind of in that movie. But yeah, this movie was amazing. Matthew Broderick, I think, for the longest time, obviously was typecast as Ferris Bueller, and he played in some other stuff, but he was definitely Ferris Bueller. This one, I mean, he broke that typecast, big time. And
he was so uptight.
Yeah, and it's one of those movies that you go into it in the first like 15, 20 minutes, you think you know who everybody is, you think you know who the protagonist is, who the actual villain is, and you'll be surprised.
Right.
So it's a great movie, well acted, well put together. Alexander Payne obviously did a lot of good things.
Right. I feel like Tracy Flick really spoke to my little overachieving heart as well.
We all knew Tracy Flick.
We all knew that Tracy Flick in high school. Trust me.
Next is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, that's easy. Yeah, I think this movie is beautiful, actually. I think it's beautifully done. I think it's one of Jim Carrey's best performances. I know people love, like, The Cable Guy and The Truman Show, but I just felt like this one was more down to earth for me. I feel like this one's the one that spoke to me the most. He's got a good filmography going there. And for me to say that this was the one that I like the most means a lot, right? Yeah. Also, Kate Winslet was in this movie as well, correct? Yep. And so I think this is a great performance by her. I think did this come out before or after Titanic? I want to say it was after Titanic. And before this movie, she had played in this movie called Beautiful Creatures. And she was maybe an older teenager in that movie, or Heavenly Creatures, excuse me. And it is one of my favorite movies with Kate Winslet. And I thought that she was a totally different, like, she didn't play the type in this movie. I think that she was a completely opposite sort of character. I just love the performances of both of them. I love the storyline. I like the kind of non-linear kind of way that they told stories. Wanting to forget a lover who's left you is something that I think that we can all relate to. And I believe if these services were available today, there are many people that would get them, right? Yep. So I love this movie. I can't say enough wonderful things about it.
Yeah, this absolutely has to be on the list for a number of reasons. We've already talked about. I'm not going to go too far. Kind of the question you asked, Titanic was 97. This movie came out in 2004.
Okay, good.
So yeah, she had some runway to get away from Titanic there. So yep, definitely on the list. Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Fast Times at Ridgemont High feels very 80s. I think it was like one of those movies that came out with like in that time we're talking in the 80s, talking about like these teen movies that were really hyper sexualized, like Porky's and stuff. So Fast Times wasn't as bad as that, but I feel like what's the one with Matthew McConaughey where he plays the
Dazed
dude
and Confused.
Dazed and Confused? I feel like it is the 80s version of Dazed and Confused, which was a 90s movie about the 70s or what have you, right?
Right.
So I wouldn't keep Fast Times on here, although I think that there's some really great performances. Sean Penn was in this. And this is one of the first movies I can remember even seeing Sean Penn in.
Yeah.
And there was a whole cast of people that went on to do wonderful things throughout, their careers. But I don't know. I feel like it's very stuck in this period of time in the 80s where it was just lots of boobs, and every movie had boobs in it for whatever reason. It just felt really stuck in time for me. So I wouldn't choose that one, although I would say I like Dazed and Confused a little bit better, even though it was a movie made in the 90s about the 70s.
Yeah, so I think Dazed and Confused is the better version of Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I watched this movie and I was honestly just disgusted.
Right.
I did not like this movie. It does not hold up.
Mm-hmm.
It is like a shining example of everything that was wrong from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cringy to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. I was watching this movie and it's every 5 minutes I felt like I was oh my God, I can't believe this was acceptable.
That was the thing, right?
Yeah, and the fact that it's regarded as this all-time classic. And yeah, I mean, we had Sean Penn come out of this. Judge Reinhold was in it.
It wasn't Jennifer. Who was
Jennifer
it?
Jason Leigh
Was in it. Phoebe
Um,
Cates was in it, I think. All of these.
Yeah, Phoebe Cates. Yep. There's a whole bunch of people that had at least careers in the '80s that came out of this movie. But oh my God, I mean, these are high school girls that they are just over sexualizing in a way that's so disturbing. The whole movie was just, I mean, I was I can't. It was tough to get through.
Yeah.
This is nowhere near my list.
Yeah.
It is not. It is not something that we need to carry forward.
No, and it just didn't even feel fresh for the time. Like I said, everybody was doing that gross thing.
Yeah.
And so it's just another one of those movies.
Yep. And one of the questions that I had kind of going into this was, when does a classic no longer become a classic, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think this is one of those movies that qualifies for that and needs to be removed from these list of classics. And it's not a movie that we need to continuously give to people and say, you've got to watch this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't that. Glengarry Glen Ross.
Let me tell you, I saw Glengarry Glen Ross. It's got to be well over 15 years ago. I cannot tell you anything about this movie except for I think Kevin Spacey was in it.
So you had Kevin Spacey, Al Pacino.
There you go.
Who else? Let me look at the poster. Alec Baldwin.
That was Ed Harris down there.
Ed Harris, yep. So it was a really well done stage play. That's what Glengarry. It's not really a movie. It's a film stage play. It all pretty much takes place in the office. They have some great dialogue, and that's what it's known for, right? It's known for its dialogue, and there's a monologue in there. I think it's Alec Baldwin that delivers it. And there's desperate times, desperate people. You got some people that are conning people,
Right.
trying to sell them property, and then it's all a sham. It's the story itself is fine. If I had seen this on Broadway, I would have been like, "Oh, that's amazing." It does not, for me, make a classic movie.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't. I mean, if it's a movie that you want to see, fine. I mean, you might enjoy it, but it's not something that's going to stick with you. It's not going to be something that just absolutely resonates. There's some good actors that are working on their craft and doing some good work, it's not a classic movie.
Like I said, I saw it like 15 years ago, and I can't tell you anything else about it. So clearly, it didn't stick with me in the way that one would think a classic would. And I feel icky about Kevin Spacey these days anyway. So not
it's
not on the list.
Off the list. All right. Next is one that you've already put on the list.
Oh, yes!
Goodfellas. This is one that if you go into the movie having seen this iconic poster, you're going to think that it's about Robert De Niro, but it's not. He's not the main character. He is a secondary character, but this is, I think, Scorsese's best gangster film. And the cool thing about this one is that it's loosely, but it's based on a true story.
Yes.
Right? Henry Hill's a real person. There was a big heist that they did that kind of got him on the map. That actually happened. Very good movie.
Everything about this movie, everything. I love this movie, and it's like people who like The Godfather and those sorts of mob movies hate this movie. Like they're like, ugh. But I found the story so compelling, right? Ray Liotta, I love him, and he's got those beautiful eyes. Joe Pesci goes full Joe Pesci.
Yeah. This is the Joe Pesci.
This is Joe Pesci, right?
Yeah.
I just, it's one of my favorite movies. I watch it multiple times, but generally around Christmas. It comes on at Christmas a lot, so I watch it then, and my poor husband, I make him watch it every time it comes on, so he has no choice but, to love this movie as much as I do. So yes, it definitely goes on the list for me, and I find it to be my favorite of the, the mob movie genre.
Yeah, it does an amazing feat in that it has you cheering for some absolutely despicable people that do despicable things, but yet you still want them to succeed.
Yep.
So, yeah, great movie. John Woo's The Killer.
As in Ichi the Killer. Yes. So I have a soft spot in my heart for any kind of like Asian revenge, ultra violent movies, and this is like as good as it gets. There's one other that I would put on our new classic list, and it's a newer version, but it's this movie called I Saw the Devil.
Yes.
But if we got to choose like a mainstream movie for the classics list that has this wonderful like Asian revenge plot that is very violent, I love this movie. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this movie, I mean, it made Chow Yun-fat this huge star in Asia, which eventually translated over here. John Woo started perfecting his trademark two-gun action, doves flying everywhere style.
Were there doves?
Yes. But yeah, I mean, for anybody watching this video that doesn't know, there is a complete genre of Asian revenge movies that is fantastic. And this is definitely one of the early ones that set the stage, and it is amazing. It really is. There is some double crossing, some intrigue, some great action. It is a movie's movie. This is one of those things where it has to be a movie. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't watched it, this is where John Woo really started taking off, and that's how you got Mission Impossible 3, I think, or 2, which was my least favorite Mission Impossible.
It had the doves, though.
Yeah, had the doves, but you got Face Off.
We were just watching it maybe like a month or two ago. We're like, oh, this is John Woo. Here come the doves.
But you got the craziness that was Face Off because of this, So definitely on the list. If you've not seen The Killer, you've got to see it.
Yeah, and check out some Asian revenge films. I swear, you can literally just type it in your Netflix and it just populates it with.
Yep, it's an amazing genre. Sofia Coppola, Lost in Translation.
I wanted to like this movie more than I did because, Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson and karaoke. And I found that maybe it was a bit more understated for me than what I prefer.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know there's a lot of things bubbling under the surface in this movie, but I just, there were cute parts, but as a whole work, I just found that it didn't say a whole lot to me. I think it talks a little bit, I think it taught, it's a character study about depression, which is, there are lots of much more entertaining character studies dealing with depression than this one. So I'm not a big fan of this movie. I don't hate it. It's just I wouldn't include it on a classics list. I think it's, it has something to say, but it doesn't get there for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Marie Antoinette is a better Sofia Coppola movie if you want to see Sofia Coppola do her thing.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, when I finished it, felt like a pretty good student film. that was then elevated because our student had connections and could get some A-list actors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You make the same exact film as a student film with, just regular off-the-street actors that nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably going to be the same level of quality, same everything, but those actors not being as seasoned or whatever may not elevate it. But it's going to feel kind of the same,
Mm-hmm.
This was her getting her feet wet. This was her striking out on her own, doing her own thing. And you got to have that first big movie.
Right.
This was hers. She then went on to do Marie Antoinette, The Bling Ring. Love The Bling Ring. She definitely grew as a director and did much better stuff. This one, it's okay. It's good. But it's not a classic for me.
Yeah. I just thought it was boring.
Most of the movie was.
Yeah.
Most of the movie was.
It had its parts, I guess, but...
Yeah, it almost felt like you were watching somebody's YouTube channel when they're on vacation.
Right.
And 80% of that content is not interesting.
No.
Mulholland Drive.
This movie almost tore my family apart. Let me tell you.
Really?
Yeah, because I went to see it, and David Lynch is an interesting, crazy mofo, right? And everything he does, like Eraserhead, Twin Peaks, everything he does is just so like weird, right?
Yep.
I loved this movie. I loved it. And then I told my mom and dad to go see it. I was like, oh my gosh, you guys have got to go see Mulholland Drive. And they went and they hated it. And they bring it up every time I recommend a movie to them. Like literally, is this like Mulholland Drive? And I'm
like, we can't take any of your recommendations ever again.
Right, because I sent them to see Mulholland Drive and they hated it. I think that I won't say that David Lynch was genius in this movie because I think that that's overused and he's kind of overrated too, right? But I liked what this film tried to do and the fact I had to do a whole lot of work to figure out what the hell it was. It was a challenge for me, right? It was a challenge to watch and figure out. And I'm like, Now, would I put it on a classics list? I think that for Lynch, I like Eraserhead better. But that's also kind of like in the horror genre as well. But I thought that Naomi Watts was beautiful. I thought that what Laura Sanchez, she was beautiful. Their performances were weird, and I liked it. I thought it was weird, and I liked it. I wouldn't put it on a classic list, though. I don't even think that this rates for a classics list, especially if we're going to talk about David Lynch.
Yeah. Well, I will say, me and your parents would get along very well. In my second episode, I did hits and misses. This was one of my misses. It did not connect with me. I felt like Lynch was just trying to do too much. I felt like there was a good movie wrapped in a just, I'm gonna be this crazy auteur and all this crazy.
David Lynch. She was David
Lynch. And I like David Lynch. I do. I love Twin Peaks. I just felt like he was trying to do too much with this movie. It just, I don't know. It just didn't connect with me at all. It just didn't work. So for me, it's definitely not on the list.
That is fair. I recognize that I have strange tastes sometimes. And I know this movie is like, it's one of those that really divides people. It's like people either love it or they hate it, and there's no like in between, right? Yeah. No one's like, it was okay. No, I've never seen that with this movie, but I wouldn't put it on a list.
Yeah, and I
put it on a list of like weirdest movies that you don't know what it's really about.
Yeah, this is that movie where you hand to somebody like, here, do what you want with this one. I'm not going to say anything. Just here.
Of movies, I swear, but I enjoyed it.
All right, so Mulholland Drive. Not on the list.
No.
Requiem for a Dream. I think we're good on this one. Maybe on the list.
Yeah, definitely on the list. That's the movie that got me into Aronofsky. So
yeah. He was pretty young, I think, when he made this movie, too.
He was. And so then I had to go back and watch Pi, which was actually one of his first films, and then following. And then, he's hit or miss these days. If you saw Mother, then, he's probably more of a miss than a hit for me. But I remember the good old days when I loved him.
Well, he's another one where Hollywood has given him a lot of chances, right? You had The Fountain, I think.
No, that movie was terrible.
And then you had Noah.
Noah, I didn't even watch it. Nah.
So.
But then he had stuff like Black Swan, right? Yeah. Like, he's all over the place. I think he's past his, I think his sun has set.
Rosemary's Baby.
I watched this movie many times, and I loved Mia Farrow's understated performance, right? But the whole time I find myself watching this movie like, girl, get out. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I get it. For the time, it was great, but this makes no sense to me. Like, why, I think that there are other movies that handle issues like this, like it's, cults, witchcraft, sorts of things taking over babies' bodies and all that kind of stuff that I would find much more compelling than Rosemary's Baby to add on a new classics list. I understand why it's important. It's just not, there's better out there.
But I will say the one thing that this movie does well, which I think you kind of hinted at, is this is one of those movies that requires you to yell at the movie screen. Right?
Yes.
Because, you're right. The whole time you're like, why are you still there?
What are you doing?
What are you doing? But it adds to the drama of it.
The horror movies need that, right?
Yeah.
If everybody was good decision makers, then we wouldn't have horror movies.
Right. But it walked this very fine line of, I want to know what's going to happen to you next because of your bad decisions versus, you know what, whatever happens to you, I don't care. You deserve it. I'm gone. I'm out. Right?
You see Hereditary?
I have not. I've
Oh,
not
okay.
seen Hereditary.
So this is my challenge to you. Watch Hereditary and see the parallels and the kinds of themes that are going on, and then decide which one should go on the list. I think that I would put Hereditary on a new classic list, in the place of Rosemary's Baby.
Next one is School Days.
I just watched School Days a few months ago with my teenage kids. Right? I love this movie and I hate this movie at the same time. Like, I think that there are what Spike Lee did was amazing.
Yeah.
With the movie. I like the musical feel, right? I love a musical now. I like the performances, and oh my god, I hate some of the stuff with respect to how he broaches colorism, and Lawrence Fishburne's character is an asshole. I mean, there's a lot of problematic stuff in that movie that I don't think hits as well now as it did back then, but it's still a movie that I enjoy watching.
For me, this would not be the Spike Lee movie that goes on the new classics list.
Agreed.
But I do recognize a lot of good things that came out of this movie. It set up a lot of what Spike was going to be down the road, right? Mm-hmm. This was Spike's second movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows a confidence and a boldness that a lot of second-time directors would not have, especially being a black man in Hollywood that you're only going to get so many chances, right? Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the runway that Darren Aronofsky has, right? I mean, he gets one chance, and then you get one more chance.
Right.
So, the chances a good part of this is a musical,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, who saw that coming?
Right.
He's now
right.
This movie came out in '88,
mm-hmm.
and he is showing black people on screen that are not thugs or slaves,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
These are people in higher education.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that their future endeavor is not to sell drugs. It mm-hmm. is to actually, be an academic and have a career and a family, and so this was a portrayal that a lot of people had not seen.
Right.
So it was from that aspect had a lot of impact. It's very important. But I think his next film, and Do the Right Thing,
it was better. Yeah.
It did a lot more.
Yeah, Crooklyn was also one of my faves. But I will say about School Days, because Spike Lee made School Days, half of the doggone cast was plucked for A Different World.
Yeah. I talked about that with Kevin. Yep.
Right. We were looking through it, and I was like, oh, he played Whitley's boyfriend in this season, and
yep.
Everybody in that movie was on A Different World at one point in time. So
yeah. I didn't realize that until watching this movie. I'm like,
mm-hmm.
this is like half of the cast of A Different World. I mean, there's Kadeem Hardison for the first time. There's Dwayne Wayne.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
That crazy? But I mean, it's I think that a lot of it doesn't hold up, but a lot of it really does, and a lot of it is near and dear.
Yeah.
So, that's not a movie that I'm willing to let go. I wouldn't put it on the classics list because I agree. Do the Right Thing is just a better film for me. And that one tugged at your heartstrings just in ways that, you don't get these days, right? With Radio Raheem, let me tell you.
Wow. This is the movie that, as you go down our new classics list, if you feel a certain way about Do the Right Thing, then you know what? Watch these other Spike Lee movies, and this is going to be at the top of that list.
Right. Agreed.
The last one that we're going to touch on is Serpico.
Oh, jeez. You take me back.
Al Pacino. This is 1973. This was an interesting film
Hmm.
for me to watch. This is another one that's based on a true story.
Hmm.
Um, but man, this movie is very just raw from a filmmaking standpoint.
Right. There's not a lot of bells and whistles in it, which I appreciate, right? But I don't know, in 73 where, you've got that and, a few years before there was 2001, which was very like technologically like a breakthrough.
Yeah, so
Like,
you have 2001, which is very polished and, like you said, very like this technological. This, it feels like the gritty 1970s New York. Like that's a character in the movie itself,
right.
and it really comes through. Um, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. That's for sure.
Well, I enjoyed it for the performances,
Yeah.
right? And I do agree with you that it felt like New York was a character in and of itself, and it was a performer in and of itself. But back in the day, I mean, even now, I have a soft spot for Al Pacino, and
Oh yeah.
I mean, he just no matter what he does, it's like now you see him and stuff, and he's kind of phoning it in. But that's because he's had this career where he's like you feel like he's one of those method actors, right? So he's like living it while he's doing the movie. So it's been a minute since I've seen this one, and I actually watched it for I want to say I watched it for a class. Oh, geez. Yeah, it's been a while, but I wouldn't put it on a classic list now. Not like a new classic list.
Yeah, I think it's it's definitely one that if you wanted to dig into the work of Al Pacino, this is one that eventually you'll get to. And what it shows you is again a younger Al Pacino that you could tell this guy has something going on. Right? The movie itself is a pretty good story about police corruption. Again, based on a true story. So you look at what's going on in this movie from 1973, and there's definitely parallels to some of the things that we're talking about still today with policing. But this is that preview of Al Pacino being that method actor, right? Because it looks like he lived this life, and you feel it. So it's a great movie from that aspect. If you want to see the evolution of Al Pacino, you've got to watch this movie. As far as a classic, it's not that endearing. It doesn't have any like classic scenes. There's nothing that I can hang the hat on that says this movie impacted cinema for these reasons, or it's going to personally impact you for any reason. It's just, if you're looking for a good deep cut, that's Serpico.
Right. Agreed. Sorry, Serpico.
That's a wrap on episode 6. It only took me 2 years to edit that video together. So I appreciate you checking it out. Big thank you to my friend Chris Love. We had an amazing conversation on my list of movies that I needed to catch up on. And we're going to have a lot of fun making our Movie a Day New Classics list. So that'll be on the website soon. Upcoming episodes, I have 4 left. I'm going to be talking about movies that I want to champion. I'm going to be talking about some new voices and really take a deep dive at the people behind the camera and what that demographic looks like. Then I'll get into my top 20. Question I get all the time is, what's my favorite movie? And then I'll do a wrap-up and a little retrospective similar to my first episode on the whole experience and even the experience on putting these videos together. So hope you come back, and hopefully it won't take me another 2 years to make my next video.